You're listening to the Sass podcast. I'm your host, Christy Rocha, also known as Sass. I identify as a woman, a wife, and a mother. That should tell you a lot already. And over the last few years, I've learned the value of talk therapy. I have seen how my inner work not only enhances my own well-being, but also my marriage, my parenting, my relationships. And in fact, you wouldn't be hearing this right now if it weren't for the work I've done. My mission is to debunk the misconceptions and stigmas around what therapy is and who it's for. Let's normalize working on our mental health and seeking help when needed. We've all heard of self-care, self-help, and self-love, but do you often wonder how to actually make it all happen? I do. You'll hear strategy-based conversations with professionals, as well as inspiring and validating stories from women who are just like you and me. Think of this podcast as the weekly therapy sessions you didn't know you needed, with a dash of sass, a lot of vulnerability, and me, relentlessly asking, but how? All right, so today I'm joined by Kerry Higgins, a New York-based holistic health coach and therapist certified in CBT. Kerry is also a friend of a friend, and I am just so glad that my Tanya Bobanya introduced us. This conversation is a refreshing take on therapy, and Kerry shares how she incorporates holistic health into her work as a counselor. Now, that being said, we know coaching and therapy are different, and Kerry takes some time today to share how working with her in either capacity will look and feel and how they differ. We also talk about social media, self-compassion, inner child's work, codependency, and Kerry's own experience in therapy stemming back to when she was a child. All right, so as always, stay tuned after for my final thoughts. And if you haven't signed up for my free 5-day self-care challenge, visit sasssays.com/care. All right, here's Kerry. Hey, Kerry, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Hi, Christy. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
I know. I love that we have a mutual connection. I instantly feel closer to you, and I'm sure after this conversation, I will know you so much better.
I totally agree. I think it was meant to be that we met to do this podcast. It just kind of fell on our laps. It's really cool.
I know. I love it. So I want to get started with you and what you do. So you are a holistic health coach and also a licensed therapist. So can you tell me a little bit about each, how they're different, and how you kind of work between the two?
Absolutely. Yes. So I became a licensed therapist first, and I've always had an interest in wellness and nutrition. And so after becoming a therapist, it felt almost like the missing piece to a lot of the work I was doing. So I went to IIN, Institute for Integrative Nutrition, got a certification there, and I would incorporate it into my therapy, but then I also would take on a few short-term coaching clients just on the side where we would focus more so on health and nutrition and wellness and less psychology and any sort of trauma or deeper issues. It was very solution focused. So that was where that all started.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I guess maybe this is just kind of, I don't know, a juvenile question. That's the word I was looking for. But what does it mean? Like, what does holistic mean to you? Like, and how can people interpret that and understand it?
I love that question. It's not juvenile because everything is holistic now, right? So
Yes.
we see it so much. To me, holistic means when your mind, your body, and your soul are in communication with each other. And when you treat one part of a person, you're treating the whole part. So I truly feel like holistic is considering all parts of a person when you're looking at one piece, because I think we are such a matrix and such a connected being. So that's why I love that word.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what are the types of things that people who work with you on your coaching side, what are they coming to you with? What are they looking for your help with?
Yeah, so it's interesting because I can also use some of my therapy foundations as a way to use in a coaching realm, but things like body image, things like accountability, working through things like procrastination, self-acceptance. We can work through some dietary changes. It can go from anything to kind of like habit work and meal planning to self-compassion, self-love. I mean, it can start at
Mm.
the top and go to the bottoms. And usually when you start at the top, you get to the bottom anyway. There's always a route. So that's where the coaching lies. And the coaching is
Mhm.
usually in a shorter container. So I'll do like a 3-month container or a 6-month container. Whereas therapy, it's a bit more long-term, open-ended. Yeah.
Okay. And and because this is on my brain, I've had two conversations recently with women who are very passionate about the health at every size movement,
Mhm.
anti-dieting, diet culture. Where do you see nutrition, and what's your take on that? Where having the background in that a little bit, what's your take?
Yeah, I love that question. So, from having worked as a professional in the field and then also having had the life experience of probably being on any and every diet, I am a true believer that diets just don't work,
Mhm.
and it's a cyclic thing. And I love the anti-diet movement. I also really like to talk about intuitive eating because I
Mhm.
do believe we need some sort of parameters to stay inside of at times. Everybody likes a little bit of structure, but too much structure, I believe, can create a little bit of neuroses and
Yeah.
labeling around food. So yeah, I would really
It's
support that part of it.
yeah, it's heavy. It's a heavy concept I'm finding, because even me who's interested in this, every conversation I have, I realize each time how deeply ingrained it is from practically birth. And it's
Hmm.
just shocking to me. I didn't expect to go down this road on this conversation today, but
Yeah.
it's still shocking to me how deep it is, and the work that you and your colleagues are doing is I think so important and going to be a big part of hopefully the future and the next gen.
I totally agree. And I mean, it's such a big part of almost every conversation. And I agree with you. It's a part of our conditioning. We're taught these messages, and then we're sort of taught to see ourselves through this lens of either good, bad. And then we look at
Yeah.
food that way, and it can create so much inner turmoil and pain. So, yeah, thanks for asking
Yes.
that question.
Yeah. And so on the therapy side, I
Hmm.
asked you in the prep questions, how do you define therapy? And I absolutely loved your response. You don't need to say it word for word if you don't remember it. I've made some notes on it,
Okay.
but if you would talk a little bit about that, I would
Yeah.
love to hear your thoughts rather than just read them.
Well, I'm a nerd and have my notes in front of me, but I also know what I think. And that I really just think therapy is such a safe space, not to get fixed or anything like that, but to unlock the strengths that we have inside of us. I think so
Mm,
many of us walk into a therapy room or any room not knowing how amazing we are. And sometimes just being in a room with somebody as your mirror and someone who's poking around and inquiring can really help you to see that in yourself. So I think it's ultimately a safe space to just get to know what's important and what you're already amazing at.
yeah, and I really resonated with what you said about therapy being a way to go on autopilot.
Hmm.
I think I think that generally, and it was funny because originally when I read, you said it's a way to go on autopilot and begin to live, move, eat, and interact with ourselves and others with a conscious mind.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And I think that initially when I read autopilot almost anywhere, I have a negative reaction.
Hmm.
But in this case, it made so much sense to me because I can start to see in my own therapy, my own journey, how that is so true. It's almost like you don't get stuck in the roadblocks every time they hit. They don't stop coming, but you're able to cruise, all these car metaphors, right? You're able to keep cruising, and that's hard to explain to someone who doesn't have the experience of of going to therapy.
I totally agree. And I love that metaphor because I think, in the same way we were talking about food, we are sort of programmed. And so therapy becomes this way to act like, just like you repeated, really raise your consciousness and actually respond to the same things you're going through in a different way. So your life
Mm-hmm.
can feel radically different when it's actually out externally the exact same, but therapy empowers you to be able to interact with it in a way that feels good for you. And you're in the driver's seat, if we're still staying with
Yeah.
cars,
Yeah.
rather than like you're just along for this crazy ride.
Oh my goodness. Well, the other thing that really, so I ask a fair amount of therapists I talk to this, but I think that we've just sort of addressed one big misunderstanding about therapy, about mental health. Can you identify other misconceptions or stigmas around mental health therapy and the work you do?
Yeah, I think a big one that's slowly becoming destigmatized is that there has to be something blatantly wrong with you to go to therapy, air quotes on that, and that you have to have gone through some major trauma. I
Yeah.
think we're reworking the language around trauma, which is so beautiful that trauma can be anything from a big T to a little t, anytime you felt helpless, unseen, misunderstood. So, yeah, I think that's a big misunderstanding that you have to have gone through something terrible or that there's something wrong with you. I also think there's a misconception that your therapist is perfect and that you're going to like lay on a couch. I remember I had a client once and it was her first time ever being in therapy and she just kicked her feet up on the couch and like laid back and it made me giggle. But I think there's there's that idea that we're just going to write in our notepad and analyze you while you just free associate. And therapy is so individual. I think that's where the word holistic comes in. For the person who wants to kick their feet up, great. For the person that wants to stay on one topic and vent,
Hmm.
that's great. Someone might want to do some solution focused cognitive behavioral therapy, and that's great.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I like what you said about reworking the language on trauma. I've been
Hmm.
feeling this a little bit in the case of trauma. I'd say I'm having a positive reaction to the reworking. Um, and I mean that to say that I've learned that trauma is different for everyone and we can all determine our what is trauma for us and what level of severity it is, and it doesn't matter that it might be different for someone else. But that being
Okay.
said, I don't know if you find this. I'm curious. I've been having a little bit of trouble mainly with social media. I think
Hmm.
mainly like they're like kind of oversaturating the social media market with triggers, boundary. I feel like these were once words that I had never heard before, and now I don't know that I want to go as far as to say being mocked,
Hmm.
but I think that I'm finding sometimes people are using them without kind of knowing the depth of the word and how to use them. Do you agree?
Hmm. I do agree in some way. I think it's so important to acknowledge that a boundary is taking personal responsibility for your needs. It's not ghosting somebody, it's not blocking somebody. That's unconscious.
Right.
So, when you're reading about a boundary or a trigger, it's so important to look for the material that is conscious and actually calls on the person reading it to take responsibility for their well-being.
Mm.
When people use it as an easy way out, oh well that triggers me so I'm, no, or I'm that's a boundary for me so I'm just cutting out of my life forever. Sometimes we have to cut people out of our lives, that's absolutely
Yeah.
a boundary we need sometimes, but I think it's so important that social media, it's such a gift, but to know that not everything we read, it doesn't have to sit with us. If it doesn't totally resonate, that could be for a good reason.
Yeah. Well, and I'm reminded I just had an image of this woman I follow. Her name is Amanda. Her handle is not skinny but not fat. But she has this like gif or
I love that.
meme or gif whatever um of Alex Baldwin saying check the source. And I just that popped into my head just now because I think too with social media we have to remember that anyone can post anything that they want,
Mhm.
and you know not everyone is trained, like not everyone has the knowledge, the background, or I think most importantly, when people are posting to social media they don't always have your intentions at heart. Most of the time they don't, right? So I don't
Mhm.
know, it's a tricky world out there for me with social media and
Yeah.
this field.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Such a good point. Like if you think about it, it's not one size fits all. It's not one post fits all. Like there could be 20 people reading the same post in completely different boats,
Yeah,
trying to fit it so that it completely fits them, and it might really be
exactly.
invalidating.
Yeah.
Do you experience that?
Um sometimes
Mhm.
I've gotten better about filtering.
Mm.
Um and I've gotten much better about checking the source and considering, you know, considering who's writing it, and actually trying to, I used to scroll and, like you're saying, first immediately how it identifies with me. And now I'm going, who's this person? Why are
Mm.
they writing it? What's their captions say? And I think that, it's human nature to try to make it about yourself. But
Yeah,
I'm trying first to make it about the person who wrote it.
that's beautiful. That's really amazing.
Thank you.
I love that. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. All right. So I want to ask you, how did you get into this work? What's your mission? What's your purpose? Why are you doing this?
Yeah. So I actually, back in college did not major in anything psychology related. I always kind of felt like it's something I wanted to do, but I always had this sort of like, oh no, you can't do that. You can't be a therapist. You're crazy. That kind of thought process with myself.
Meaning you thought you were too crazy to help people, or what do you mean? Or it was just a crazy idea to do it?
Like a crazy thought. Like
Okay.
just like, no, you're not gonna do that. Just sort of like you're gonna be in marketing or something like not so deep. You're just gonna it's gonna be fine. So
Interesting.
I kind of like avoided the intuitive pull for a bit.
Mm.
And I went back to school after working in the fashion world for 2 years. I was
Mm.
like, I would say I was on a pretty good path. It was the time period where it was either sort of like make the next step in the career or make the shift. So because grad school is such an investment, I went back to like a night class. I took a human behavior class at night, loved it so much, and just had like a full body yes. So where I just knew this is what
Mm.
I should be doing. And I didn't care that it was a longer route. I just felt so aligned and relieved that I had found what felt like my purpose.
Mm.
Because I was really struggling with that for a bit. And then I went back to school. That's where I met our mutual connection.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, I've worked at eating disorder clinics and addiction and recovery. Now I'm at a general, mental health agency. I worked for a private practice. So, what also led me to this work too is just my own life experience as well. I've been in therapy since I was a little girl. I think my first therapy session was in the fourth grade. And drawing on the whiteboard, chatting, not really understanding it was therapy, but just like
Mm.
this cool lady I thought I got to chill with for a
Mm-hmm.
little bit. But I've always had such a deep value for therapy and being in that room. And so to be able to facilitate that for somebody else and be on the other end of it just feels like magic. At the end of the day, sometimes I just really thank God. I'm like, wow, I feel so grateful that however many sessions, 11 people let me into their lives today. How cool is that? That they trusted me
Wow.
enough, and
Wow.
that's really special to me.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
I love that. The full body yes.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people, in my experience and myself included, I think initially there's a little bit of a struggle to understand that feeling because you just don't know it until you have it.
Hmm.
But then I also find people ignore it. I mean, what was it
Yeah.
for you that that just made you take the leap? I mean, I think that you did it and that's wonderful, and thinking of anyone out there who's listening and wants to, like, there's so many people who don't, right?
Hmm.
What was the shift?
The shift was I had to do it. I had to be on the other side of it to realize the cost of not doing it. So
Hmm.
that the benefit of doing it outweighed the cost.
Interesting.
And I even, my body started to tell me. I started to get, like, I think one of the last weeks that I was at my job, I started to get like an itchy throat.
Yeah.
And I thought I was having an allergic reaction to eggs, but it was actually a panic attack. And I don't normally get those. And so
Hmm.
my body started to tell me, and I had done so much thinking about it that when it became so clear, I actually didn't need to do any thinking at all. So I would say to that person, just think about the cost of not doing what you're desiring or not following your intuition.
Yeah.
Because I felt that intuitive pull initially, but I needed to take the long route in order to feel really dug in to what I
Hmm.
was doing. And that was my journey. I mean, sometimes we need to do that to get to where we're going.
Yeah. Well, and I'm also interested in, you said that your experience as a little girl was, oh, this is just such a cool lady I get to hang out with. I actually don't know that I've spoken to anyone who's shared that they were seeing a
Hmm.
therapist at such a young age, I'm pleasantly surprised to hear that you took it as a positive experience.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I loved it. I loved
Yeah.
going to therapy. I did not. My mom was also really great about it. It was never viewed as like a punishment or something you had to do after school. It was, hey, I'm acknowledging that things at home aren't great. This is your safe space to go talk about that and do what you need to do in there. I think for my mom, it was her way of doing what she could.
Mm,
Um,
that's really cool.
yeah, I loved it being all about me. Oh
Yeah,
my
I guess
gosh.
so.
She had snacks.
It was a
I was
party.
pumped.
Snacks, games.
Everything.
Oh, that's so nice, actually. Oh my goodness. And you've, talking about your own experience too. I know, you mentioned that you've dealt with some anxiety, depression, eating disorder. How
Mhm.
how do those, let's start, I mean, I know anxiety is more current for you.
Mhm.
How does that
Totally.
manifest for you?
Anxiety right now, for me, it feels very mild and it almost feels um, normal, right? Like anxiety can just sort of keep us on alert. So I see the positive sides of it, and it will manifest as sort of overthinking about the future or a hint of perfectionism here and there. And it also gives me an opportunity, though, to come back to myself. Like I can say I'm so good at spotting it now without
Mm,
judging it and just sort of asking myself, okay, what do you need? I really find that the self awareness piece, and I would say I have a pretty solid spiritual practice that really keeps me grounded in
mm-hmm,
that. So the anxiety is definitely more current. Um, I would say high school years, early college years, I struggled with body image
mm,
and eating disorders, and with that came just I would say high functioning depression.
okay.
I really had a great like high school experience and awesome friends, but it was just very disconnected from myself and would go in and out of that here and
Mm,
there. And I would say both of those were such a huge gift because I don't think I would probably be a therapist today unless I continue to work through all of that
yeah.
during those really formative years.
Yeah. I think that it's on one hand, it sounds like a shame, right? That I'm thinking that it tends to be that a lot of people that I come across, and myself included, you ultimately find your passion or your path,
Mm.
and it usually stems from one of your tough personal places. It's like
Hmm.
there are a bunch of sayings that I can't think of one right now. But like, it's like one of those, there's like one about like flowers blooming in the, dirt or something. Like there's something like that. It's like you get so low that it's like, okay, and when you kind of start to come out of it, or you have the hindsight now you want to help others. Now you
Hmm.
want to help who you were then, who maybe didn't have all of the resources or the support, or we all have our people around us, but there's just
Mm.
certain things you don't know until you're past it.
Yeah. Yeah. The lessons become really clear when you're past it. And the gratitude, if you're really reflecting, and when you're ready, it's such a personal process. But the gratitude for everything and anything you've been through, if you can actually see the way it's come to fruition in your life, um,
Hmm.
that feels really good.
Yeah. So what are some of the ways that you've found over the years, because I'm sure they can overlap with some of the ways that help your clients, either on the coaching end or the therapy end, that what are some coping mechanisms that you use, or some strategies you often advise people to start looking into?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, totally depending on the person because everybody is so different. One of the most common ones, I think, especially working with people who struggle with boundaries or sort of people pleasing, and almost kind of like that golden girl thing where we have to be perfect and
Mm-hmm.
on all the time, is self compassion.
Mm,
And not just self compassion in terms of being nice to yourself, but actually treating yourself like you would treat someone you truly love, talking to yourself like you would talk to somebody you truly love. Like one of my favorite methods that I use under this type of therapy called Team CBT that I was trained in postgraduate by a man named David Burns. It's called the double standard technique. And I find it so fun. You do a role play with the client. And so you're their best friend coming to them with the same exact problem, and you're sort of like regurgitating their negative thoughts, and they have to talk back to it. And it might feel silly. And some of them are like, oh my God, I don't want to do this. But it's such a beautiful practice of actually noticing, like, wow, I would never say half the stuff I say to myself to somebody I truly love.
Yeah.
So that's usually a good starting point.
Yeah, you said too, you said something, I'm looking for it now. Oh, about approving of yourself and approving of even the tough stuff, right?
Yeah.
Okay, what does that mean, and how do we do it? How do we approve ourselves?
Yeah. It's a toughie, but it's so important. So to approve would mean to release judgment. So to really approve of yourself. We're so quick to judge if we're in a down, or if we're not feeling well, like, oh, I should be feeling better, or oh, I'm just being lazy. No, you're not. You're feeling this way for a reason. And if you actually release the judgment, you're going to get to the root of it, or let the emotion move through you in a more clean way, rather than berating yourself with self-judgment. So to approve of all emotions, we're so quick to label them as good or bad or positive or negative. Really, all emotions are telling us something. So that practice of approving of every single one of them can actually give you a little bit more of a clear path to asking yourself questions. And it usually comes with removing judgment. And so catching yourself when you do that. Yeah.
Do you find that there's a difference between how we're socialized in terms of the heteronormative male, female? I mean, I don't know. It just seems to me that women struggle with this more. But like, why? Like, first of all, why? And second of all, what's the counter? What's the thing that men are like, gosh, we just can't get this right, you know?
Yeah. So I just want to be clear on the question. So when you say struggle with this more, is it the self-compassion piece or the people-pleasing part?
I think the self-compassion and people-pleasing, now that you say it, but yeah, I just feel like women are, I just, like you said, I think when you brought up the role playing, it became clear to me, or that's where my brain went, because it is, I think, so much more eye-opening when, like, I'm picturing how I talk to my own friends. I would never talk to them the way I talk to myself, you know? And so, so it feels like that is a more natural challenge for women.
I love that question, and I guess I'll answer it in terms of, like heteronormative men and women, but also no matter how you identify. I mean, I've studied this, and it's personal belief, but not everyone has to agree, is that every single person has masculine and feminine energy within them. And the feminine is completely emotional. You know, we're flowing, we're intuitive, we experience things in a really deep way, whereas the masculine is more goal-oriented, solution-focused, logical, and when in balance, the two complement each other really well, right? So the wounded masculine might be struggling with the same thing someone in their feminine might be. And so I do think it's no mistake that women struggle with this more. We tend to feel a lot more, whereas men are maybe conditioned to be able to express 2 to 3 emotions, because that's their own conditioning from society, if we're speaking in heteronormative terms. So I think it's no mistake that women might have this a bit more. And there's also, I think, in the wounded feminine, there is a lot of competition around, you know, who's doing what, who looks like what. And so when you move from that into sisterhood, that creates more compassion. But I think we can all say we've had those friendships where it doesn't always feel so safe, and there seems to be a lack of compassion and judgment. Heavy judgment for each other. And so
you're there.
Yeah, I hope I answered that question.
No, I think given what we know now, given what you know even a ton more than I know, I think you definitely answered it as simple as the question was, is I think as simple as the answer could be, in the sense that we were trying to just narrow it down to that heteronormative. I mean, everyone is going to be identifying with all different sorts of roles and feelings in their own way. And so
Totally.
it is hard to generalize. And so I appreciate you, your
Yeah.
tactfulness in answering that.
No, no, of course. And I think the important part is just to know every person has that inside of them, but women specifically, we feel a lot. We're
Yeah.
like rivers,
Yeah.
just flowing and
Yeah.
experiencing it all.
Yeah. So,
Mm.
talk to maybe now that woman who is going, yeah, that's me. I'm feeling all the things.
Mm.
What can they look forward to after however long it takes them with a therapist? What are some of the things they can look forward to getting out of it?
Mm. I love that question. Well, they can look forward to experiencing a deeper connection with themselves, feeling more empowered to express themselves authentically and effectively with the people in their lives, the people that they are bending over backwards for, doing all the things for. Um, and they can look forward to experiencing, hopefully, right, more permission to acknowledge that taking care of themselves, whether it be therapy, any other kind of personal development work, it benefits your family, it benefits the people you love, and it benefits you. It's not selfish.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully an overall theme of feeling liberated in some way.
Mm.
And also, it all depends on what you bring into the room, your goals, your attentiveness, what
Mm.
you're going to put in. It's a relationship, the
Yeah.
client and the therapist.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
work, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
You can't just show up once a week and that be it. It's a lot more than that, right?
Yeah. And some days that might be all you're capable of. You might be so tired that it took every cell in your being to get you to that chair or that couch or that Zoom screen these days. So that might be it. That might be the way you're showing up for yourself, which is perfect. But being able to confront the hard stuff inside of you, that will get you through, I guess, that tunnel of
Yeah.
resistance or whatever it is you're coming up against, and knowing that your therapist is going to be there for you the whole way to catch you on the other side, but also continue to push you, not
Yeah.
catch you and hold on to you.
Right, 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 right.
Right. The idea, I'm a big believer that, and a lot of us are in therapy for many, many years. And I told you I started when I was in the fourth grade. Um, Many therapists will say, I don't want you to need me 15 years from now. I want you to experience what you need in this room and then
Hmm.
forge forward.
Yeah, yeah. What is it, where do you think, because I'm curious for myself,
Mm,
where do you start to see the point where you could say, okay, we might be done for a little while?
yeah. Well, I think it would be a mutual understanding, but from what I would see is when the therapeutic goals that you set in the beginning of the relationship, or just even if you're in the coaching world, coaching is a bit different because it's more of like a set program. But in
Hmm.
terms of therapy, when you start to reach the goals that you have set for yourself, um, and your life starts to shift in ways that feel good for you, and it doesn't have to be external, it can just be the way you're relating to your world. I would say that's usually a telltale sign when
Yeah.
somebody starts to feel like they're hitting that mark. And sometimes clients will come in, or people will come in and like, I don't really know what to talk about. And that's perfectly fine. That doesn't mean you're done with therapy forever. But when you start to realize that maybe the meat of the sessions has changed, it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Um, I tell people, I'm like, we don't have to make things up to stay in it. Not that anyone would make anything up, but sometimes people will say, well, there's nothing really wrong today. And I'm like, well, there doesn't need to be anything wrong to come to therapy.
Right.
But it does become a time for the client and the therapist to talk about the relationship. And either are we going to take some time off, or are we going to set a new agenda together with what we'd like to work on, so it stays
Hmm.
focused in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I find for myself that those days where I come and I'm like, I don't even know. Either nothing is, like you said, quote unquote, nothing's wrong, or I just sometimes it's like all I can do to get to the phone at that time. And so I haven't
Mm,
even had a chance to really think about what I want to talk about or get out of that session. And that's usually when my therapist will bring something up that I mentioned like months ago and just say, we touched on this. Why don't we explore it a little bit further? And I think that there's some really cool stuff that happens there.
mm,
I think it does have to do with that inner child work and whatnot. Can you tell people a little bit about what inner child healing is and what
Yeah.
that process looks like for you?
I love inner child work so
Yeah.
much. Um, what that process looks like, it could be seen in the term reparenting. So it's just acknowledge the first part, I believe, is acknowledging areas in your childhood where moments when you're thinking of yourself in terms of that little girl or that little boy, what did I not get that I needed? And how is it showing up for me now? Right? That's sort of saying if it's hysterical, it's historical. So those are great spots to look at where your inner
That's
child
great. I
is
love that.
suffering.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's good.
I didn't make it up, but it's really a helpful way to look inside of yourself. And so it's the practice of giving yourself the things that you didn't get that you needed growing up,
Hmm.
and being really vigilant about it, like making it a job of yours because you're reparenting. So then you're becoming a parent of your inner self and your
Hmm.
I like to say the little person inside of you, because we all have those moments when we're in adult bodies and we feel small, we feel unseen, we feel misunderstood, and there's a reason for that.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I think if you wouldn't mind, I think, see, I have to ask questions because they are follow ups and it's what I'm thinking, but I sometimes don't know enough about it to ask the question appropriately. So I'm going to try. But in terms of inner child work that you're just talking about, and sort of what you're saying as far as giving, the little girl or the little boy inside you what you needed at a time when you didn't get it. I mean, I think it's important to say here too that, and I want actually you to say it, but I'm stumbling through this, but it's like,
Okay.
it doesn't have to be that it was this really traumatic childhood or this really traumatic childhood experience. Like, it could just
Yeah.
be as simple as you were in the classroom and you had a teacher who never called on you and you raised your hand. Like, it doesn't, I think what I'm trying
Hmm.
to do with this is I'm trying to help people understand, as well as myself through these conversations, is that I think a lot of these kind of therapeutic words can be intimidating,
Hmm.
and they can be a little bit like, oh, there are people who have it way worse than I do. I don't need
Uh,
that, or that's not for me. And I'm trying to help people understand that we all have things that we can heal. Even if you had the best parents on the planet, they were human. They missed things. They had their own struggles. And now I've
right.
talked a lot, and I want you to talk
Well,
about
I
it.
love what you're saying, and I'm so
It
glad
took me
you,
a while, but I got there.
yeah. Well, because it's such an important message, and I'm so glad you're saying that, right? Because for someone listening, I would hate for someone to listen to the term reparenting and say, "Oh, well, my childhood was good, so this doesn't
Right,
apply to me." It totally applies to you, and it doesn't mean your parents were bad.
right.
Like you said, they're human, and it can simply just mean things that you didn't get as a child. It doesn't mean your parents failed you, but it could mean, in your example, I didn't get called on, or I got picked like second to last at gym class every day for a
Hmm.
few weeks or a day, and it sucked and it hurt my self-esteem really badly. Or my mom was late picking me up from daycare one day because she had a meeting. I
Yeah,
mean, it can be that. It does
yeah.
not have to be this catastrophic thing, every I love what you're saying, because I hope people can at least hear this and they take away one thing, that anything that you're thinking or feeling in terms of what you needed that you didn't get is valid.
Hmm.
um, and it's not a way to demonize anybody, it's just a way to acknowledge yourself and
Right,
acknowledge your inner child.
right, right.
Yeah.
We're not through the process of healing ourselves. We're not, shaming our parents. We're not shaming our siblings or our friends or our family. It's just
Absolutely not.
because as kids, we really process everything so selfishly, right? So we're not we're not thinking about how, if probably, just use your example, mom's heart is breaking that she's picking you up 10
Yeah.
minutes late, you know?
Uh-huh.
Like,
Totally.
it's funny you said that because my mom, who will listen to this, was late picking me up
Oh.
from everything all the time. I mean, everything and all, those are tough words, but
Hmm.
now I'm like 20 minutes early, dropping my kids off, picking them up. I'm like, never gonna be late.
Oh my God, that's so funny. And that's so amazing that I mean, it's interesting that I use that example and it totally applied. But yes, at that, I mean, depending on how old we're talking, like we're in this egocentric state of mind as we should be. That's where we are developmentally, where so if our mom is late, it's not that, oh, mom's late. She's at a meeting and she loves me so much. She's trying to put food on the
so
table.
busy. She works so hard.
It's that I'm not important enough to be picked up when my friends are picked up. What's wrong with me?
Right.
It becomes about the self.
Yeah. Well, and we do that as adults too, a little bit, right? It translates. Which it's maybe not over the case of being 10 minutes late for someone picking you up, but we do it in much larger, well, larger is a funny word, but like much deeper, concepts of what's wrong with me versus thinking about what's going on for the other.
I feel like a perfect example might be if you are an adult and you're in a group chat and you're making plans and you think say your friends have made plans in a group chat and then they let you know and you're like, well, wait, why wasn't I in that group chat? It's a similar wound and it's all valid.
We're all valid. Well, and I think even thinking of that example, you in your words to me prior to the interview, there were a couple of things that really stood out to me. The way other people react is not a reflection of you, more so the way they feel about themselves. Why is that so hard for us to understand? Like, why is it so hard to get out of our own way to see that? I don't know. Just that it seems so simple, but it's fascinating that it's such a hard thing. I don't know.
I wish I had all the answers to that, but one thing that just comes to mind is that I don't think we were ever truly taught that. And that is something that really clicked for me when I started to work on my spirituality, or I don't want to say work on it, just develop that more and looking through some codependency work, right? So everyone has their own individual process and everyone's emotions are their own. And so if you grew up in a house where there was, a lot of fighting, or not even a lot of fighting, but where someone's emotions became your job to fix them, you're going to be really affected by other people's emotions, no matter what, even if it's a dirty look or something else. We kind of develop the subconscious thought that we're responsible for the way other people feel if we're in that space. But I think it's hard because we're also all on autopilot, right? Like if you're driving and someone flips you off, it's going to take a minute to really take a beat and take a breath to say, okay, that man might be having a bad day. It is not about me. I mean, it's also so important to acknowledge you're human and be like, that was bananas. What was that about?
Yeah.
But it can be freeing when you get to that place because it no longer becomes your responsibility.
Yeah. I've said this before, and I'm sure I'll say it more often, but my therapist for a long time had to constantly remind me that I'm a human. Like I'd come to her and say, well, this is what's happening. It bothers me. Now tell me how to not be bothered by it. She's like, it really doesn't work like that. Like it doesn't. It doesn't. You can't just like flip a switch. But part of the other part of this process for me was, and you wrote about it in your notes to me, that working from the inside out, understanding that everything we need is within us. What I'm always curious about is, how do we take these words, these really powerful and very actually to the point words, and make them mean something to someone who doesn't know what that feels like yet? Because, and from my own context, when that light bulb went off, that's why this show is here. But it took a process for me to understand that. And it's not because I hadn't heard those words before. It's not because I didn't believe for that person saying them, it was true. So I'm always curious, how do we make it matter to someone who has no experience yet with the process? How do we get them interested in it? What do we do? How do we make people how do we make society be just more looking inward?
Well, I think sometimes for many of us, it goes, we have to look outside of ourselves for so long to realize that the only place left is to go in.
Oh, interesting. I like that.
For for a lot of people, that's what it becomes. And also what you, in the example you gave me, it seems like you trusted your process, or at least in hindsight, you're trusting of your process. You can have
Hmm.
some sweetness towards it.
Yeah.
Like it's the reason you're here.
I was always a person that was interested in therapy, but had all the misconceptions and all the misunderstandings about who it was for, and it couldn't have possibly been for me. But
Mhm.
once I started, which started, by the way, because I heard someone who I know personally just talking about how they just go. She just looked online and saw that her insurance covered it and she had a copay and she just went. And I was like, oh, okay, let me see what I could do here.
It's
But
like that.
yeah, yeah. But once I started, I had no idea where it was going to go, but I did have a confidence in that it was right to start. Like that,
Mm.
and talking about, trusting the process. And I don't know, I just have that once I get down a road, I really just trust and believe that whatever is meant to work out is going to. And that was the same with therapy. It just was, yeah, I have no idea where this is going to lead. I thought it was one thing when I went into it. Now 2 years later, it's an entirely different thing. But yeah, just okay, this is the road. Let's just see where it goes. Like I was not a person who put up resistance. It was like, oh, you want to try this exercise? Let's see what it does.
That's awesome because it sounds like you didn't have much attached to the outcome. You were really just present with it. Okay, I'm going to take this one step and see where it takes me. And I think that's awesome because typically that's the hardest part of doing anything new is the initial steps that it takes to get the ball rolling.
I think for me, it was mostly that I just had all of the overwhelm had
Mm,
built up for so long. And I was also, pretty much, I worked from home with my kid. Like I was pregnant and I also wasn't just used to like talking to an adult. And so I started meeting with my therapist and it was just like, okay, can I just talk to you? And it,
yes.
it just, it was almost like my body, my mind had no other choice to just let it out and be open because it had been keeping so much in for so long. It was just like blah, like here it is. Like I'm picturing like a volcano. It's just
Yeah,
like there you are, here you are. You're being paid to listen to me right now. Like let's do it.
I love that.
Yeah.
Oh, it seems like you just melted into the experience and it was just felt so right and resonant at the time.
I did. And I think for me, which I know is not the case for everyone, I really clicked with my therapist almost immediately.
Mm-hmm.
I know that sometimes that can be a struggle, like having to go through that process. What do you
Sure.
tell someone to look for when they're in the process of seeking help?
Yeah, so I always tell somebody, um, most therapists will offer like, free consultations or just a 15-minute phone call to get a feeling and scheduling and, just, you catch a vibe.
Right.
So I
Yeah.
would just encourage somebody who is looking to start this process, find 3 to 5 people that are either in your plan or in your budget, schedule a free consultation with them and ask them questions and see how your body reacts when you talk to them, when you see them, if it's a video thing, and you'll get a feeling in your body. And sometimes people just feel warm and fuzzy and right, and sometimes
Hmm.
you just don't get a feeling that it would work. And I encourage people to give themselves options, especially right, because if it took everything in you to get to therapy
Yeah.
and force yourself to go to the one person on your plan, it's not fair to you. You deserve to feel safe and comfortable with somebody that you are excited to work with and is
Hmm.
excited to work with you. So I always recommend doing that as a preliminary process and then listening to what your body says.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't want to get all the way there and then start and be like, you know what, I knew from the start this person and I just weren't gonna mesh because it is such a it's so funny. It's such a strange. It's so intimate,
Mm-hmm.
but from my seat, it often feels so intimate from only my side. It's like, I don't know actually much about her, but she's my best friend. You know what I mean?
I love
Like,
her so much.
yeah, no, like, I don't know. When this is all over, like, we're moving in together. We're just going to be like sister wives, and like, that's it. She doesn't know that it's that deep, but it is.
That's amazing. I mean, you feel really safe and comfortable with your therapist. That's so clear, and you look forward to your sessions.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I told you she's my best friend.
No, we're moving in together.
No, like, this is it. We're just getting tattoos soon, I think.
I'm sure she's down.
I actually think she would be. That's really probably how we know she's doing a good job, because I actually believe that she would. Oh my goodness. Well, Kerry, has anything about either your own journey or your professional life, has anything about all of this that you've done, you've studied, truly surprised you, that stands out in any way?
Ooh. Hmm. Yeah, well, I might think of a better answer when we end this podcast, but I'll go with what's coming to mind is that you can think you know something. Like I can think I have something figured out clinically, or I don't know if this is something new that I've learned or that I'm always reminded of, is to drop my ego, right? Like every
Mm.
client is so different and offers something similar, or offers something different, I should say. So even if the problem or presenting issue seems similar, it's two completely different people. And
Mm.
so oftentimes we think that therapists are there to, or the therapist can feel, I should say, inclined to say, okay, how can I fix? How can I help? How can I save? And some of the most healing work we can do is to just sit back and do less,
Mm.
and actually listen and drop our ego and knowing and wanting to be the professional that's going to come in on the white horse. So it surprises me, but it's also not surprising. It's just a humbling reminder I get daily.
Yeah, yeah,
I guess.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that, because my my husband will say to me, like, you're going to go back to school, right? Like, you're going to go back to school, you're going to become a therapist, like, you're doing all this work. And I'm often taken so aback now when I'm in my own therapy sessions to realize that I don't know that I could do it. Like, I really enjoy being the one talking. Like, I don't know how, especially there are times, particularly when I finally say the thing that she's been thinking for a half an hour, and I finally take all the steps to get there because I see the look in her eye when she's like, aha, so we've
Mm.
arrived, and it doesn't happen all that often, in the sense that she lets me know that, right? But I'm always like, God, if that were me, I'd be like, listen, this is what it is. Just get there,
Let me give it to you straight.
Connect the dots, Christy. Connect them, But it's usually like 6 sessions later, I'm like, oh, that's what we were talking about. Like, that patience
Mm.
is just phenomenal to me. So,
Yeah, I could so see that. And it seems like you doing this podcast is your way of still allowing yourself to be in this world. And then also, hey, you could be a therapist one day and do some more confrontational work and
yeah.
just say the thing, right? Every therapist has their own style.
Oh. Okay. Wheels are spinning. Carrie, is there anything that you would have asked yourself or wanted to mention today that I didn't bring up or didn't think to talk about?
I don't think so. I really loved your questions today. I thought they were so insightful and really got me thinking.
Excellent.
I, yeah, I hope anyone listening, I guess what I really just hope is anyone listening who's on the fence about therapy or any kind of personal growth work knows that no matter what background they have, they're eligible. You don't have to have
Mm,
some criteria to be worthy of this work. Every single person is worthy of it, even if you feel like your problems are too big, too small, they're not. You're just you.
excellent.
So I
Yeah.
hope whoever is listening to that gets that from this.
Yeah, that's it. That's everything, right? So how can people find you? How can people work with you? Give us all the
Yeah,
things.
all the things. So I'm on Authentically Well on Instagram, so you can connect with me through there. You can send me a message. I also have my website there, and you can message me through there, authenticallywell.com. That would be the best way.
Excellent. And you're licensed in New York.
Yes, currently in New York, hoping to be licensed in New Jersey and Connecticut. But
Okay.
right now, New York.
Okay. But the coaching work you could do for
Yep.
anyone, anywhere.
Coaching I can do for anyone, anywhere. Yeah.
Perfect.
Hmm.
All right. Well, Kerry, thank you so much. This was so great. I learned a lot. I'm sure everyone listening did as well. And I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
So, for me personally, this type of conversation is so fulfilling because I feel like I'm just talking to a girlfriend, chatting away. But lucky for me, that girlfriend is an expert in a field that I have a major interest in. I so enjoy swapping therapy stories, and I really enjoyed learning about how Kerry's experience was different and sometimes the same as mine. And why that's interesting to me is because I just always assume that her being a therapist, that her experience in therapy would be somehow, I don't know, almost different or whatever, but she's a human, right? Anyway, I loved what she shared towards the end of the conversation around dropping her ego with her clients. And it reminded me of last week's show with Dr. Alex. Dr. Alex said, "We need healers, but we need empowered healers, not disempowered healers." Kerry is an empowered healer. We need more healers like her who are willing to drop their ego. We need healers who can look at the whole person and recognize when additional or different help is needed. There's not one size fits all. There's not one fix for everything going on in your life. You're going to need help from a couple of different areas, a couple of different professionals. And so I thank Kerry for so openly sharing her experience as a professional in doing that. And, it's Dr. Alex comes at it from the MD perspective, and here's Kerry coming at it from the perspective of the therapist. And these are the types of women that will then come together to help us, help our whole person. And that's really cool. And lastly, I'm going to repeat a 2-word phrase that comes to mind every time I think of Kerry in this conversation. And that phrase is intuitive pull. She says it more than once, and I absolutely love it. She says she felt an intuitive pull to be a therapist for some time, but ignored it. And so I'll ask you to ask yourself now, are you ignoring an intuitive pull in your life? What is it? Why are you ignoring it? What can you do about it? And then I'll just remind you that you don't have to face whatever it is alone. Reach out to Kerry or another professional, seek out friends and family you can trust, and get to work. All right, bye. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Sass Says is a production of Luann Nigara Inc. This podcast is meant to be educational and not meant to replace professional therapy or professional medical attention. To learn more about today's show and what's new in my world, head over to sasssays.com. Thanks so much. Talk later.